How you doing there, guys? You're watching Dirt Bike Channel. I don't know how I'm gonna edit this down, so this may or may not be the beginning of the video. As you know, this bike seized up the last time that I was riding it after a drag race, and so I've brought it down here, and Kevin with Moto Experts here in Spanish Fork, Utah, is tearing this bike apart to see what we have found, see what's wrong with it. I didn't know if we had, at the time, a piston stuck, the bottom end completely trashed, didn't know. And so we've taken it apart now to the point where we've got the head off, and head looks fine, the piston looks fine, and now Kevin is taking the cylinder off, and I just kind of want to get some of your initial impressions on what you've seen so far and what you think we're gonna find.
Well, everything looks okay so far. The spark plug color looked good. The head looked good. It didn't look like there was any signs of detonation that would be result of you know, too high of compression. I mean, the top of the piston actually still looks brand new. So I'm kind of curious to see what the cause of the seizing was. But we should have the cylinder off here within a couple minutes.
Now tell me what you were just saying about these the cylinder bolts. You said you try to loosen them gradually. What were you saying about that?
Yeah, so on the head, so when you're removing the head and the cylinder, you want to avoid just spinning off every nut one at a time. In some cases it can cause the head to warp. So I usually just do a quarter turn in a star pattern on the head, and then just cross pattern on the cylinder until there's no more tension on the bolts.
That's interesting, because that's a technique that I use when I'm torquing things down. But what you're saying is that it's important to do even as you're loosening things, right?
Correct. And then you might see me using an impact wrench for removing certain parts, body, bolts, frame mounts, skid plates and whatnot, but I generally avoid using any kind of an impact wrench when I'm going back together, just to avoid cross-threading, damage to the threads, or over-torquing.
Removing the exhaust flange now, right, to get that head off?
Yeah, to pull the cylinder. Okay. Sometimes what you do, you just grab a soft mallet and you just give it a couple light taps to break it free from that base gasket.
So what were you doing there? You were turning the piston over to see if it was binding it?
Sometimes when you push the kickstart through, you can get some help from the piston to push the cylinder off. This one's
stubborn.
A little bit stubborn.
It's almost like that radiator's in the way, huh?
Yeah, I might just pull that out of the way.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, now we've got the radiator out of the way, and we think that cylinder is going to come off.
All right.
Up and out. So I wanted to pause right here. I'm going to ask Kevin for some of his initial impressions on why this happened, but since this filming, we know what happened. We actually did a bunch of measurements on the cylinder and on the piston, and then talking with a few different industry professionals and a few different industry experts, we had definitely not enough clearance between the cylinder and the piston. When the cylinder was replated, it was replated for a certain piston, and that piston that we ended up putting in the bike was the wrong piston. It was too big of a piston, and there was not enough clearance between the cylinder wall and the piston, thus the failure. What are you seeing here? Anything out of the ordinary?
That's really rough. Lots of scuffing on the intake side. Same on the exhaust side. You can feel a lot of vertical grooves with your fingernail, even through my glove.
That's not good.
Not good.
And on our piston here, it looks like we've got some pretty good scraping here. Did we break a ring? The rings look like they're intact.
They look like they're intact. They're not seized in the grooves. Well, that front one is seized on the exhaust side. Same with that lower ring.
So they are seized on the exhaust side.
Yeah.
And then, that
see.
piston is just hammered. And this happened after, since this had a piston, somewhere around 10 to 12 hours ago of motor time. The top of the piston looked great, didn't it?
Yeah, the top looks great. I mean, well,
we saw it in the B-roll. I'll roll that in. The top of the piston looked really fantastic. It's the cylinder wall and the side of the piston and the rings that are just hammered. Any concern about the bottom end at this point?
You know, the good part is a lot of times when we seize or you blow top end, the bottoms of these skirts will crack and break off, and they'll go down into the crankcase and just grenade. And as you can see, the skirts are both very intact. There might be some shavings down in the crankcase, but just at first glance, everything seems to be spinning very smoothly. I don't hear any grit or noise. And then the other thing we look for is if there's any rod knock. So up at top dead center, I'll check, and just kind of holding the rod in place with both hands, I'll push down and up, see if I can get any kind of movement. And this is very tight. Not very much lateral movement on that rod either. So my initial impression is the bottom end is fine. And what we'll typically do in this case is do a flush of the bottom end. We can use kerosene, and then you just do some rotations of the crank, and then we suck it out. Do that a few times, each time making sure that we're not pulling any debris or shavings out of there. But this should be good to go with the new top end.
As you can see, Kevin and I continue to chat about this top end and kind of some of the things that had happened with this particular cylinder. And what we decided is that the cylinder had been probably been fixed twice before this, and there was enough kind of problems going on with it. And then with the turnaround time that we wanted, we decided to just do a brand new cylinder on this rather than fix it a third time. And it will only cost us a few more dollars. It would end up being, about the same as having the cylinder redone to just get a new cylinder on this one. So we ended up with a new cylinder, which I will show in a future video where we're going to put the bike back together with a brand new piston, brand new cylinder, where we will have the correct tolerances between the cylinder and the piston. And so we shouldn't have any problems with this, because this bike is a bike that I want to be giving away in very, very, very good condition here very shortly, as we start a sweepstakes on this bike in March. On March 1st, this is a bike that will be included in the sweepstakes along with the Husky TE300i. So you'll have a 60-day period where you can go into dirtbikechannel.com and get some gear or get some, different things that I'll have up on my website over there, and you could enter yourself to win this bike. So in full disclosure, right now it is, obviously February when I'm doing this video. I've got the bike all put back together and she is ready to roll again. So let not your heart be troubled. The Honda rises from the ashes like a phoenix. And I just wanted to thank Kevin and Moto Experts for helping me with this rebuild on this thing. They were very, very helpful. And we've learned a lot so far working with this bike, and it's been a fun project. Anyway, take care guys, and we will see you in the next video.